You've been grinding in the gym, showing up consistently, putting in the work, and yet your progress isn't where it should be. Frustrating, right? So, you start tweaking your routine, swapping exercises, trying something new every week, hoping that's the missing piece. Why? Because someone told you that your muscles need to be shocked to keep growing. Sounds familiar? Well, here's the harsh truth. Constantly changing exercises is one of the worst mistakes you can make if you want real muscle growth and strength gains. Every time you swap out an exercise, you're resetting your progress, forcing your body to start over instead of building on what it's already learned. Think about it. If you were learning a new skill, like playing an instrument, would you change songs every single session before you even mastered the first one? No. You'd focus on getting better, refining your technique, and progressing over time. Training works the same way. Now, don't get me wrong, there are times when changing exercises is the right move, but most people do it for the wrong reasons, sabotaging their own progress without even realizing it. So, I'm breaking it all down. When you should stay consistent, why constantly switching exercises is a bad idea, and the key moments when swapping actually makes sense. Let's start with why changing exercises all the time is a bad idea. Progress comes from consistency. If you're always jumping from one exercise to another, you never give your body enough time to adapt, get stronger, and build muscle efficiently. You might think you're keeping your training fresh, but what you're really doing is slowing down your results without even realizing it. The biggest issue? You never get the full benefits of progressive overload. Getting bigger and stronger isn't about doing the most exercises. It's about mastering the ones that matter and pushing them further over time. Every time you swap an exercise, you hit reset on your progress, and instead of moving forward, you're stuck relearning the movement again and again. And let's talk about form. Strength gains don't just come from lifting heavier weights, they come from becoming more efficient at a movement. If you're constantly jumping from one exercise to another, you never develop that mind-muscle connection that allows you to maximize the effectiveness of each rep. Instead of squeezing out extra growth, you're just spinning your wheels. Not to mention, every new movement comes with a learning curve. The first few times you try a new exercise, you're not really pushing your muscles, you're just trying to figure out how to do it right. That's time spent adjusting instead of growing. And let's be real. Social media makes this even worse. Every influencer is doing some crazy new move that looks fresh and exciting, and suddenly you feel like your training is outdated. But what you don't see is the years of consistent training they put in before they ever started experimenting. They built their foundation. First, you need to do the same. Constantly switching exercises also means you can't track real progress. Muscle growth and strength depend on gradual improvements over time. But if you keep jumping from one movement to the next, you'll never know if you're actually getting stronger or just doing something different. And when you don't see results, frustration kicks in, motivation drops, and suddenly, consistency goes out the window. So, if you're guilty of program hopping and constantly searching for the best exercise, stop. The best exercises are the ones you stick with and get stronger at over time. Keep the core movements, push them harder, and that's how you actually see results. Now that we know why constantly switching exercises slows down your progress, let's talk about when you should stick with an exercise and how long you should actually keep it in your routine. The biggest mistake people make isn't just changing exercises too often, it's giving up on them too soon. If something is working, there's no need to mess with it. But how do you know when it's time to keep pushing forward instead of looking for the next best thing? First off, if you're still making progress, that's your sign to stay the course. Strength training isn't about variety, it's about getting better at the right movements. If you're adding weight, hitting more reps, or feeling stronger each week, you're on the right path. Stopping just because you feel like you should change things up? That's a recipe for stalled gains. And let's talk about how an exercise feels. If a movement is smooth, targets the right muscles, and doesn't beat up your joints, why would you drop it? Too many people abandon exercises that are actually working just because they crave something new. If it's effective, keep it in your lineup and focus on getting the most out of it. Another big mistake? Not giving an exercise enough time to prove itself. You can't judge a movement after 1 or 2 workouts. Strength and muscle take time to develop, and if you're ditching exercises too quickly, you're never allowing your body to truly adapt. Stick with it for at least 8 to 12 weeks before deciding if it's actually a bad fit for you. And if your goal is building serious strength, you need to commit. Strength doesn't come from jumping around between movements, it comes from repeating, refining, and progressing on key lifts. You don't get a stronger squat by swapping it for leg presses every other week. You get a stronger squat by squatting consistently. Now, this doesn't mean you can't ever adjust small things. Maybe you tweak a grip, adjust a stance, or switch from a barbell to dumbbells while still keeping the same fundamental movement pattern. Compound lifts like squats, deadlifts, presses, and rows are the backbone of any great program. These shouldn't be replaced just for the sake of change. They should evolve with you as you get stronger. The bottom line? Patience wins in training. If you find yourself getting bored with an exercise, don't rush to replace it. Push yourself to get better at it. Instead of constantly searching for something new, focus on lifting heavier, improving your form, and making every rep count. That's how real progress happens. Real quick, if you're finding this helpful, hit that like button and subscribe for more No BS fitness advice. Helps the channel, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying you should never change exercises. There are definitely times when swapping movements is necessary, but the key is knowing when and why to do it, instead of just switching for the sake of variety. One of the biggest reasons to change an exercise? Pain or discomfort. And no, I'm not talking about muscle soreness. That's part of the process. But if a movement is causing sharp joint pain or persistent discomfort that doesn't improve with better form, it's a sign something isn't right. Not every exercise is suited for every body type. If a movement feels off no matter what you do, swapping it for a better variation can keep you training hard without wrecking your joints. Another time to consider a change is when you've hit a true plateau, and I mean a real one. If you've been working on an exercise for months, using solid form, progressively overloading, and pushing yourself, but your progress has completely stalled, it might be time to mix things up. Sometimes, switching to a slightly different variation can break through stagnation and get you moving forward again. Your goals also play a big role in exercise selection. What works for strength-focused training isn't always the best for muscle growth, and vice versa. If your focus shift, maybe you were training like a powerlifter, but now you want to prioritize aesthetics, you'll need to make adjustments. That could mean replacing strength-based lifts with movements that target muscle hypertrophy more effectively. Then there's the mind-muscle connection, or lack of it. If you're doing an exercise and never feel it working the right muscles, even after tweaking your form and sticking with it for a while, another movement might suit you better. Some people struggle to feel their quads in barbell squats, but throw them into Bulgarian split squats or leg presses, and their quads light up instantly. If an exercise isn't giving you the activation you need, it might be time to swap it for one that does. And let's not forget injury prevention. Some movements naturally put more stress on certain joints, and over time, that can lead to problems. Take deep back squats, for example. They're a fantastic exercise, but if you have lower back issues, forcing them into your routine might do more harm than good. Swapping them for front squats or goblet squats can give you the same benefits without unnecessary strain. Lastly, your training phase matters. Strength training and hypertrophy training aren't the same, and if you're shifting from one focus to another, your exercise selection should reflect that. Maybe you're coming off a strength phase where you were grinding out low-rep heavy lifts. Now that you're focusing on hypertrophy, adding more controlled, higher-rep movements can help maximize muscle growth. The bottom line? Make smart changes, not random ones. If you're swapping an exercise, have a real reason behind it. Changing movements without a strategy won't get you anywhere, but adjusting with purpose will keep your progress moving forward. If you do need to swap an exercise, the goal isn't to start from scratch, it's to make the transition as smooth as possible so you don't lose progress. A lot of people make the mistake of changing movements too drastically, and before they know it, they've completely reset their training without realizing it. But there's a smarter way to do it. First, instead of jumping to something completely different, swap for a similar movement. Let's say you've been back squatting, but for whatever reason, it's no longer working for you. Maybe it's causing discomfort, or your progress has stalled. Instead of ditching squats altogether and jumping straight to leg extensions, stick with a compound movement that still trains your lower body effectively. A front squat or hack squat variation keeps the same core mechanics, but shifts the load in a way that might suit your body better. That way, you're still making gains without completely resetting your training. And here's something most people overlook, keeping the same rep and set structure. If you've been working with 4 sets of 8 to 10 reps, there's no reason to throw that structure out just because you've changed exercises. Your body is already used to that workload, and by maintaining that structure, you can seamlessly transition into the new movement without feeling like you're starting over. Now, just because you're switching to a different movement doesn't mean you ease up on the intensity. The new exercise still needs to be progressed the same way as your previous one. That means applying progressive overload, adding weight, improving form, increasing reps, or controlling the tempo over time. The key is to treat it like any other lift and actively work to get better at it, not just throw it in as a placeholder. And if you want to make real progress, you need to track it. A lot of people assume they'll just remember their weights and reps, but without actually writing things down, it's easy to lose track of your progress. Whether it's a workout log, an app, or even a simple note on your phone, tracking your lifts lets you see if you're actually improving or just going through the motions. The bottom line? Switching exercises doesn't have to mean starting over. As long as you swap smart, stay consistent, and track your improvements, you'll keep your momentum going and continue building strength and muscle without setbacks. At the end of the day, constantly switching exercises is one of the biggest mistakes you can make if you're serious about building strength and muscle. Progress doesn't come from chasing variety, it comes from sticking with the basics, mastering them, and pushing yourself to improve over time. The best lifters aren't the ones doing the most exercises. They're the ones getting stronger at the right ones. That doesn't mean you should never change things up. Sometimes swapping an exercise is the right move. But when you do, make sure it's for a real reason, not just boredom or FOMO from the latest workout trend. And most importantly, have a plan so you don't lose momentum. Training smart isn't about doing more, it's about doing what works, and doing it better. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you been guilty of switching exercises too often? Drop a comment below, and let's talk about it.